Welcome back to Worlds 2021. This is the first quarterfinal, and already T1 off to a fantastic start, taking down Hanwha Life Esports in the first game. Now Hanwha with a chance to fight back, see exactly what they're going to be able to do to adjust. But the problem was, gentlemen, that I was running into, was the fact that T1 just played a way better game as a whole.
Across the board, yeah. It was not a mechanical error from Hanwha Life Esports at any real point. I mean, there were a few weak performances from Willer. He did use a stopwatch early, got caught several times, but like, you're the Xinjiao, right? You don't have a lot of options. But what I was most impressed about for T1 was just their ability to, as they always do, play around objective control and vision. And when you're playing Zoe, you need that vision so desperately to actually be effective. And he just was not able to, Chovy, in that game, to pull it off.
And it reminds me of that moment in How to Train Your Dragon, you know, where the kid's looking up to his dad, and his dad's like, well, you just have to change this, and indicates the entirety of him. And
yes.
Honestly, like, that's how much Hanwha needs to get better, right? Because the entirety of T1's game was just better in game one. So, changing the draft could be an option, and of course now, you've got Hanwha Life Esports on the blue side.
And it would be such a victory for Hanwha, because the reason why they were 8th, we haven't really talked about yet. We did mention shortly that they were better in spring, but the reason why they were in 8th was not because of individual performances, although some players didn't do as well, but the team just felt like 5 individual players, barely in comps, not communicating, and throughout this tournament we've seen them get better and better and better at it. And this first game to me felt very much like a regular split game for Hanwha, where individually you can see the talent of these players, but then when it comes to actually matching teams that rotate a lot sharper than they used to, that have better shot calling, that have better target selection, they kind of fall apart. And in this next game, you need to either get bigger leads due to draft in the laning phase, otherwise it's gonna, I think, be really, really hard.
Or just get LeBlanc. And that's kind of what they have the option to do
right
right
open.
here.
They certainly do. I 100% think you first pick this, because this is where you can actually have Chovy on a champion where LeBlanc is the most, I can be anywhere, I can do anything. If I win lane, I get items. I can actually blow up almost any squishy champion in the game. Very difficult to track. One of the highest skill expression champions you have in League of Legends right now. It is the Chovy champion for this meta, and I cannot believe they banned Jarvan instead on red side.
And that to me leads me to believe that T1, you know this is coming, right? So this is going to be a very clear cut. Let's not forget that as it will be the Lissandra, which has been the go-to counter pick, that T1 also have let a Yuumi go through and actually were able to punish it, unlike many other teams.
Yeah, no, that's very true. Faker had gone for the Lissandra. Actually, like, part of me wanted Faker to pick Morgana for revenge against Pawn in 2015, but not going to be the case. And of course, doesn't work the same way as it used to, as Varus being considered once more. This was Deft's go-to pick back in the day when Varus was out of meta, actually.
Yeah.
He'd play the lethality Varus when he felt like a lane was something that he wasn't going to be able to win, and now up against the Aphelios, he's going back to it one more time. I believe we have not seen Varus at all so far yet.
Yeah, I think this is the first time, and he's going to lock it in here early on. Now, the Xinjiao, I'm not a huge fan of, but you do have a lot of poke, obviously, with both the LeBlanc and the Varus to set up engages before the Xinjiao actually goes for that full-on engage, but did not go well for Willer last game, and so a little bit shocked that he's shying away from the Viego, or at least saving this pick until later.
I was kind of hoping to see a poke comp come out. I think the Varus and the LeBlanc work very well together. Use the Varus to get targets low, and Chovy can go in and blow them up instantly. But instead, you go for the Xinjiao, which I think the 2v2 is strong with the LeBlanc, right? Kind of acts as a lead light. But here it is again, the Poppy that Owner has been able to pull out, and the lockdown and peel that is already available for T1. To both protect Gumayushi and also proactively find target, kill target. It's going to make the life of both Xin and LeBlanc so much harder.
I think you've got to ban away the Thresh and the Lulu here as Hanwha Life Esports. That does still leave open a lot of options. The Rakan is banned by T1. They have no interest in picking that one. But even if you ban both of those, they can still pick up the Leona, which is very strong with the composition they have as well. So, I mean, it is looking very good for T1 right now. Now, the Kana targeted ban on this Kennen is so huge. You've taken away his 2 most played in the Jace and the Kennen. And historically speaking, especially in this tournament, T1 have relied so much on Kana being the damage. With Lissandra, you have a lot of utility. You have the ability to shut down this LeBlanc. but you still need more consistent damage, and Kana on this Jace, or rather the Kennen, could have done a little bit of engage and damage, but you've taken that away now.
Yeah, you've actually taken away his entire World's Champion pool. The only champs that he's played have been the Jace, Graves, and Kennen, so he's going to have to bring out something new here. Of course, still a lot more available, and in fact, the Poppy's already locked in. Could theoretically be a flex towards that top side of the map, but highly expecting Owner to play it once again, as he was so good on it previously in the tournament, as the Thresh, thankfully, is going to be banned.
I'm thinking Gwen. I think that a Lulu-Gwen rotation here for T1.
So good.
It works really well. Gwen was a really big pick for Kana, even in the LCK Summer Finals. It's basically been his go-to outside of some of the major picks that we've seen. And this is a really interesting pivot, and kind of, to me, yeah, I'm really happy to see this, because look at what is still left of Morgan's champion pool, right? I think most picks that you might be expecting, think of things like the Renekton, think of things like the Ornn. Both of these you're completely fine playing the Gwen into. And if you look at the lanes that are already available for T1, you can choose to play towards that Gwen, or you can just leave her on her own. Kana's shown that he's been able to sustain himself without resources, scale into 2 items, and then be an absolute menace in both team fights and side lane.
The Nautilus coming through here for Vista, which is one of his best champions actually back in the LCK, is an interesting one because it doesn't feel inherently strong against what T1 is running. You can try to disrupt some of the front line with this, but it means I think you're going to really get outpaced in the mid to later parts of the game. You're not going to be able to have that much power roaming mid either. Now, I like it more when you do see this Renekton coming through, because now you have a lot of lockdown, you have a lot of CC and burst damage, but I think this is a pretty easy Lulu 5th pick here for T1 now. But with the Renekton, they pivot to the Braum, and you can't hate it. I think the Lulu would be a lot more powerful for what this composition does, because you already have such a great front line, but the Braum is so good into the Renekton.
Yeah, trying to mitigate some of those melees. I loved the look on Morgan's face when he got his Renekton. Of course, like, we've been talking about Morgan's improved, things like that. No, Morgan just started picking Renekton again, because that is the champion that is 150% his comfort. Of course, Lyric already letting us know on the desk.
There's a team called WE.
Yes, I believe there might be. They've been around for a while, as it turns out.
I feel very scared for Hanwha's chances in the second game, because I look at his draft and I think that it is just, if you don't get ahead early, it's way worse than last game. You're playing into Gwen with a bunch of melees, right? And then you kind of have the Varus, which is something. But he gets negated by the Braum. You have lockdown in the Lissandra. You have engage in the Poppy, as well as a lot of tankiness between those 2 champions. And you have Gumiush's Aphidos yet again.
Yeah, do you know what it looks like to me? It looks like the draft on Hanwha Live's side was a pop quiz. And T1 got all of the answers right.
It does feel that way.
We're locked in.
And I think the Poppy is just so powerful right now in this meta. It's strong against LeBlanc, very survivable. Obviously, the dash being a bit of an issue there for Chovy. I think Chovy's and Hanwha Life Esports' win condition here is going to be blowing up Gumiusi. If you can blow him up, this team's composition in terms of sustained damage goes way down. So you're going to have to protect this guy. You're going to have to make sure you know where Chovy is at all times. You need to know where Varus is. You need to track him, because if he ends up hitting an arrow, then Chovy dashes in and gets that kill. Suddenly, it's a 5v4 fight that Hanwha Life Esports wins without Aphelios almost every single time. So that's got to be your win condition.
Even then, I think in the late game, once Kana has 2 or 3 items, that is not enough anymore. Like, that, you still need to take into account how much damage this Gwen is going to be able to do, looking at the champions that Hanwha Life have available outside of Chovy. Dealing with that Gwen later on is going to be such a nuisance, and Hanwha Life, first 10 minutes, better get ahead in every lane.
Yeah, let's see whether they can do that, as we are onto the Rift for game number 2. Yeah, I'm just thinking about this from Def's perspective after 20 minutes, and that is a game that I don't want to play.
No.
Personally, you don't have any mobility at all, and T1 can jump on you from almost every single angle. It's very, very scary.
And also Braum.
Yeah, no, it's just, there's no good news.
No, it's just
Renekton could get kicked out of the team fight by Owner. It is very difficult. I mean, either one of these frontliners for Hanwha Life Esports is going to be removed in an objective fight, very likely. So it feels like Hanwha Life Esports desperately tried to copy someone else's homework, almost even in terms of that. For going back to the reference you were saying earlier about the pop quiz, like in terms of how they wanted to finish this draft, because I understand Vista wants to have power in mid, wants to be able to maybe threaten Faker so Chovy can get a lead and get ahead, so he wants to be on this roaming support. They have enough prio with this Varus into the Aphelios. I do like that because that's one lane where you can get prio, then you can send Vista to mid and hope to get Chovy that money he needs so desperately early. But otherwise, this Nautilus doesn't feel very strong into this composition at all, and is often just going to be isolated and blown up so quickly if he decides to engage ever.
Yeah. And I'm sort of looking at this game like, Chovy, okay, that's an interesting one. Gets himself an Electrocute proc, as Faker has taken the Aftershock. Not going to be any Electrocution Lysandras this time around. Pretty happy with that. As Carrier now sitting in the brush, gets a bit of a thumbs up here, as Deft is just going to walk away.
I like the Electrocute more. I think that the value of Aftershock early on is pretty relevant, but then you can argue, as Faker, later in the game, your only job is utilize your passive and protect the rest of the team.
Yeah. And this is, of course, our featured matchup presented by Mercedes-Benz. Chovy versus Faker. And already, you know, Chovy doing okay in it. It's Faker down underneath 200 health, but it's not exactly the greatest early on here for the Lysandra, but she is pretty good at weathering the storm and denying all of the jump-ins, as that Circle of Frost is going to indicate exactly that, but of course not enough just yet.
If he connects that chain there too, Faker might have to blow a flash there, is going to be forced out of lane. And that, of course, will be matched by Chovy. But yeah, this is where Chovy found a lot of success in game one early. Was behind in CS, technically speaking, at 15, but did threaten Faker, prevented him from using teleport. And once again, you're seeing how strong this player is at early lane.
And it's not impossible, right? Because if I remember correctly, it was Jensen into Icon that was actually able to, in this counter matchup, still get the upper hand, still be able to find repeated counter kills.
Yeah, and I mean, it's a loose counter matchup.
It's a post-6 counters.
We've actually seen that in other regions, like us here in Korea, we think that Lysandra very good into LeBlanc, but we've seen in other regions that hasn't even worked more often than not.
Yeah.
So it's not 100% or anything like that hard counter or anything, as Owner moving up towards the top side of the map. Morgan actually playing this one out pretty well so far, but things very, very even. And we've already said Harm will need huge leads if things want to be good. Already a flash on the bottom side as Gumayushi gets himself out of the way. The Gravitum comes on through as well as Deft walking away, level 3, so can't use the ult or anything like that. It's Carrier. He wants even more. The passive stacking up the flash eventually comes out, and T1 brute force Harmful Life out of the lane.
Double pots had to be used here for Deft. He barely gets out of this one, and now you've lost control of a lane that you already had pushing power in, and feels like a little bit wasteful to go for that type of all-in. Losing your summoner as well here. Yes, you still have the Hex Flash here as Vista, but it's painful.
One upside here is that if you can set up a play or maybe a possible dive around Gumayushi at some point, now that the flash isn't available, that might provide you a little bit of counterplay, but as a whole, probably going to be the same story which we've seen throughout the entire tournament, which is Gumayushi gets Aphelios as Faker.
Yeah, gonna have to claw his way out, and he does so. But Chovy once again with a lot of control on the wave. And now, if Faker goes home, it's going to be a lot longer before he makes his way back to the lane, as Vista also unlocked on his way back in after having to blow that flash bottom side.
So the type of play I was talking about with this Nautilus that we see from Vista all the time. It's something Carrier loves to do. Effort, of course, from the LCK. Very famous for doing this on the Nautilus, where if you have something like a Varus, you can keep that lane pushed, you have the prio, and then you just come up mid. And if Faker is not here, obviously you don't look for the pick, you just help push the wave up and grab some of the extra CS. So it's being nice here for Chovy. We'll get a free back as a result.
Liking this from Vista, helping out Chovy, who really wanted to back there, but the wave not actually crashing. So getting a little bit of help there from his support, making sure that those stacks stay down and you share the gold that is available to you. And again, Kana not really getting any resources, really a big switch up that we've seen here in style from T1. Especially recently where they have been focusing so much on Kana, but so far, it's working out fine, right? Gumayushi and Carrier are able to generate leads quite aggressively.
Yeah, Owner as well with a decent lead in the jungle. Hit level 5 a little bit earlier. Is able to be a couple of camps ahead of what Will has been able to do as well. So far, the Poppy, not exactly active as far as getting lanes ahead, but certainly is able to do a lot of work for himself. As Canna now looking for his first plate of the game, and will snip that one down very comfortably.
Yeah, Morgan saves his teleport, wants to have that for a potential skirmish on the bot side of the map where Owner has been hovering quite a bit. You see he's taken away the Raptor camp now here on the blue side. So having that teleport in those bot skirmishes, that was, you know, something Lyric joked about earlier on for the early game for this Renekton player. It's certainly something that could be very useful in the next upcoming moments. Because speaking of which, I mean, you could see the group up here. Willer is scouting this out. And having that teleport right now is so critical for Morgan.
Really like this read here, because you see the camp is gone, you see the ward, it's relatively fresh, so there's a reasonable expectation that Owner is still hovering about top side. Vista and Deft play accordingly, very respectfully, and with that knowledge, Morgan also, again, available to shove in. And the problem, of course, inherently in this matchup is, yeah, he gets a plate. I think he does really well in the 1v1, as should be expected of the Renekton early on. But this is not the kind of lead you need to secure against the Gwen, because once that Riftmaker hits, it already becomes a lot harder to just stay away from the threat of an all-in with needlework, and then post-second item, it's much, much worse.
Yeah, I want to see what happens after this first Rift Herald, because that's when things can really get out of hand.
That was a sexy follow, but not actually going to eventuate, result in anything.
Well, I mean, he gets a nice trade here once again.
Looked very, very cool.
It did look cool, and Vista's here. I mean, we've talked about this so much power here with this roam.
Double backs.
Hex Flash?
Oof. Needs a few extra links in that chain, unfortunately.
Almost Herald time.
But the timing of this is so huge. Just like we saw last game, you force Faker in, you shove these waves in, Herald spawning, Life Esports trying to get every small advantage they can before this objective they know T1's going to fight for.
And Chronicler, are T1 going to fight for it?
I know this is a trick question, because everyone knows the answers to this, Atlas. This is the freebie points on the pub quiz. Yes, they will 5-man commit to Herald, because they've always done it.
That's a pass mark for you at least there, Chronicler. We'll check back in.
Guma, Yushi, and Keria shoved out the early wave. Are just going to sack the wave that's being shoved in the bot right now, but Humble Life actually able to get over here with everyone.
Is this a River K-Ram, potentially? In this one, as Morgan walks on through, getting some vision down. As you can see, Faker taking care of the mid lane. The rest of Humble Life Esports moving on in.
They have a lot of vision control around this Herald, so they can collapse on the Faker, force some resources to come back mid. The Faker's going to have to clear this wave. At some point, T1 is going to have to engage if they want this.
Yep. Down to one caster creep each. They are both going to be cleared out. Both of these wards also dying at exactly the same time. Both of these teams doing almost exactly the same thing. We'll see whether an actual fight is going to break out as Humble Life remain in control as far as vision is concerned on the Herald.
You have teleports. Yeah. Just send Kana to bot to actually catch the wave. Stop letting the wave die.
Yeah, I'm actually sad also too that T1, I mean, looks like they are going to commit to this, which is very, very greedy in terms of positioning. Your Faker has to be so careful. They're just going to straight up start this.
Oh, engaging in onto T1 is dangerous, though, as we've got a back coming through from Morgan, maybe thinking about getting himself an item. A teleport coming on down from T1 as Faker's going to get hooked, has the ultimate, keeps himself alive. Chains of Corruption come out as well, though, as Deft looking for some arrows. HLE getting in amongst it as well, as she eventually decides that she wants to get out, as Chovy bullying Gumayushi away from this pit, and T1, they don't want the fight.
T1, I mean, they really just got completely out-rotated here. Morgan's on the backside, by the way, and is going to be able to catch this wave, but hit point advantage goes to Life Esports. They've got long-range engage, too. You have to respect this as T1. This could be a huge mistake. There's a teleport coming through top side here.
That's the second teleport to come on in. Faker, no flash available, but now has full health once again. As Morgan, he can blast cone over, but the information is now there from T1. They know that this isn't going to work out, as Owner is going to steal away the Rift Herald. Now Morgan diving on in immediately. He gets exhausted. Canna looking for Willer on the backline, but has he overextended? It's a question. Morgan staying alive for so long, and first blood goes to Faker. Chovy gets smashed into the wall at the back of HLE's pit, but does make his way out. Gumayushi trying to get him, as they're not going to fall for that funny business. It's a double kill for Faker, and T1 a huge lead in the early game.
It would not be an LCK quarterfinal versus LCK v LCK quarterfinal, but we're going to have crazy extended fights here on the Rift Herald, and I got to say, T1, it looked risky, it looked really greedy. They were there with low health points, but when they put that ward over the wall, I think it was Faker who actually hit that blast cone to keep Morgan out. That was the turning point. You push Morgan away in that moment, he can't come in on top of everybody else. Faker teleported to the top side of that fight. At the beginning was really scary, but they ended up winning the fight at the end of the day. And so much aggression, so much all-inning from Hanwha Life Esports. Chovy's not able to get the kill on Kana, who's now going to get a ton of extra gold on the top side of the map.
And here in the X replay,
Look at this blast cone.
I think, yeah, this blast cone is really, really big. I think in general, just again, the limit testing that is being found here by T1 is incredible. Like, look at how confident Kana is playing. This is some needles, but the amount of damage that he soaks is up to the very limit. Gets healed by Guma once he goes back into the rest of his team. Barely stays alive as Chovy goes in, but in the end, it's T1 that's standing. My main issue with this fight is not how well it's played out, because I think both sides did well, but why did we stand there for 2 minutes as multiple waves were just being thrown back and forth in that bot side? Not necessary at all. However, like last game, the fight I think was played out nicely by both sides, and the end result, T1 is the one that are very, very happy by the end of it.
I think the pessimistic LCK caster take on this is not a good look for our region, but you know what? It was certainly flashy, okay?
No, it was beautiful.
Disappointed Dad Wolf makes his return to the world stage. I like it.
But yeah, I think the blast cone was the entire crux of Hanwha Life Esports' plan, because you're teleporting back in as Morgan, and if you don't get that engaged, if you can't get over that wall, your whole plan crumbles in an instant. So that ward and that hit there by Faker to destroy the blast cone just makes this fight a 5v4, unfortunately. So we're going to see a bit of a support battle here on the bottom side of the map. The Drake is the next objective to contest, and right now, Faker has control of the mid-wave. Owner's got the faster rotation.
Yeah, Deft actually going to have to cleanse very early on in this one just to get rid of some Winter's Bite slow. As the ult does go wide there from Carrier, was expecting him to walk into the brush, decides to take the long way around, but it doesn't really matter. They get the cleanse, they also get more plates here. And Deft is being pushed way back. And I think that that fight around the Rift Herald was a massive Hail Mary from Hanwha Life Esports. They sacrificed so much because they needed to win that. And it feels like it was backbreaking because T1 now with a lead and the composition that scales so well moving further forward. Hanwha Life Esports very quickly running out of options this game.
And trading even here, like, yeah, maybe Morgan, you know, is able to pick up the extra plates compared to Gumayushi, but it's, who does the gold go to?
Yeah, sort of trading even, but not really, right? Because you're splitting the gold in a Renekton versus, I mean, yeah. Gumayushi's getting all the money.
And even if it was favorable, you're still scaling worse. Yeah. So, like, even trades or slightly favorable trades are still bad trades. And in of itself, it says a lot that you call a basically, like, what was it, 8-10 minute fight with a composition already their Hail Mary. Like, that's not a good place to be in as a team. And I think that this is something that we've seen Hanwha do a lot domestically, right? Like, this is one of the reasons why this team has faltered so much in summer. And we can still see in these plays, see how good these players are. Yeah. But that's not good enough anymore, because T1's players are also very, 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 very good.
T1, I feel like as soon as they decided they were going to put Owner in the roster, and they fired the Danny from their coaching staff, right? We saw this upgraded T1 that made it to the summer finals. Their macro just suddenly, very steeply exploded into world class, right? And you see these rotations from Faker. Part of the reason why they picked the Aphelios is because they know that they can lane swap, go top, and then threaten plates while also gathering for a Rift Herald. Plays like this and group ups like this are why this team is one step ahead of Hanwha Life Esports in terms of macro. And Hanwha is just not matching, right? I mean, there were so many opportunities for Morgan to use that teleport and do something else, but he decided to go for the flank, the one Hail Mary that didn't work. And I mean, these small decision-making advantages that T1 have put us at a 3K gold deficit for Hanwha Life Esports. This is something this composition can't realistically recover with.
What was the score again in the regional gauntlet? It was 2-3.
Yeah, it was definitely
but how did it start? I think it's, if I remember correctly,
are we going to the Camille again?
It started with a 2-0 for T1, right?
I wasn't going to talk about that yet.
You were saving. Oh, I'm so sorry.
That's a game 3 conversation.
We're
gonna have that because I'm sitting back. I'm subdued. You know, I'm joining the T1 narrative.
It's not Atlas's first rodeo. Okay.
He's been around the block a few times.
He knows how to spin the narrative. We might have to do some real web spinning, man. We might see at least in Game 3 at this point with how things are looking right now, because this is not a game, again, that Hanwha Life Esports can realistically recover from unless they get some kind of gimme picks or make a heroic play, and it's going to have to be Chovy, I think, who looks for it, because right now he's a LeBlanc sitting under turret.
And that is what I want to talk about. Like, how do you get back into this game as Hanwha Life? And it relies on T1 making, I think, pretty big mistakes. Because the amount of damage here available now, I think, in terms of like base champion damage, is still enough. Right? I think the next 10 minutes, you're still able to find something. But you're talking about someone from T1 overstepping, getting taken down. There's a lot of pick potential, right? And then you take down one member. You move up to the objective. And then T1 eats 1 or 2 arrows too many, right? Deft is approaching, hopefully, his second item. Already has the Serpent's Fang, which has a lot of value against the T1 comp. And then once you've gotten that done, maybe you can snowball that into a Baron. And from that, you can turn the gold lead and keep the tempo high. But it doesn't look like T1 is going to let them do that.
I mean, they also have a Braum.
Yeah.
So I don't know how, like...
Well, yeah, I'm not saying
very
it's
difficult to get these
it's a
arrows
good
to
plan,
do
Atlas.
anything. Yeah.
I just want to provide... We need a plan.
It was a desperate attempt. It was a desperate attempt, and I appreciate you taking it.
I mean, the other thing is, like, right now as Chovy, watch him try to find any damage, and it's just not realistic.
Well, the rest of the team coming on over. Shirley's down very, very low as it's the flash on forward to get things started, but Willa just throws his life away in the end. Canna, yep, pretty immune right now as Vista looking to try and get his way out. Oh, not quite able to land the passive just there as the piercing arrow does a lot of work. Canna eventually, with the help of a few dots, is able to take down the Nautilus. As over the wall goes Chovy and into the death chamber with him as Morgan as well trying to walk his way out. T1 extraordinarily far ahead right now. 5-0 in the kills. Shirley steps up and they're looking to break down this turret as Canada's standing in, getting a bit of his thumbs up out there. And this could just be 2 turrets right here.
That right there is why T1 left the LeBlanc open. They knew it had to be picked up. You can't let that champion go to fake it. Chovy picks it up. And then you have a composition that doesn't let the champion play the game. I mean, every time Chovy goes for something, he gets blown up.
Everybody's grouped up. You've got a Braum. There's a lot of CC here on T1's side. And you're trying to poke a Poppy. I mean, that was the target they chose. The Crescent Guard wasn't on the target you want. You have to be able to hit those squishy back targets. We see a flash is burned here. Once again, Poppy's going to escape LeBlanc, but if you can't put the threat onto Gumayusi, then what are you doing, unfortunately, as Chovy in these fights? Like, look at where he is when the Crescent Guard comes through, and it's Owner who's isolated. The toughest target in T1's roster to kill, and instantly Carrier presses ult, and you're done. You're in a choke point against Gwen. What are you going to do?
And this is such a key Hanwha Life thing. Well, I think that engage from Willa, when the rest of the team is ready, that can win you a fight. I actually think that's a nice attempt to try and split up. But the rest of his team isn't there. You can't go in like that when you have a team that isn't available to actually follow up on that very aggressive engage. The rest of your team actually is short range in the case of Chovy and Morgan, or in the case of Deft needs to actually be in position. Instead, you force them to opt into a fight that they don't want to take, and you dig yourself deeper and deeper into the hole.
Oop, Canna decides that he doesn't actually want to be in the river at that point in time, and I don't blame him. It's Chovy and Deft over to the side. Owner takes a bit of damage, but he's already very tanky right now on this Poppy.
You can't all-in Faker, because Faker's ult's up. You can't all-in Gumayusi because Keria is with him non-stop. You need everybody to go in all at once.
They're still trying to find something, though, as Canna dives on forward. It is going to be T1 locking down the Drake, but can they win the fight? And I think that the answer to that is yes, as Chovy able to get back over the wall as the Poppy, very, very low, but is going to survive. We have a Mountain Soul this game, but we also just have an extraordinarily powerful T1, so I don't think Souls are going to be a conversation that we'll need to have.
The engage here for Hanwha Life Esports, I mean, the coordination is so hard to pull off, but again, as you mentioned, Chronicler, Chovy's on the left side of the fight, and there's a Poppy between him and the team that the rest of his squad is trying to get on top of. You've got Keria in a perfect spot. You've got Faker with his ult at the ready, so how do you crack this? How do you break through? And the answer is, so far, they have not been able to at all whatsoever. Owner's taken away so much of Willer's jungle that he's starting to have a pretty huge experience lead as a level up here. 40 CS up, and they're going to try to take some more.
Yeah, you can see Faker clawing his way over.
And these moments where you let the LeBlanc through and prove why you're not afraid of it means the rest of a best of 5 like this is so terrifying, because suddenly you're like, well, do I even want to prioritize LeBlanc for Chovy going into game 3 or 4 or 5 if you're able to bring it back? I mean, this is just a complete outclassing right now.
And I stand by the fact that Hanwha Life making it to quarters in the first place was a big accomplishment for a team that has had an incredibly rough summer, that has been unable to match a lot of the other talent that we've seen within the LCK, and they leveled up throughout the tournament. But unfortunately for them, T1 are also not the same team that they were coming into the regional gauntlet. I think you said it at the beginning, Atlas. How much have they improved? thus far, I feel like we're getting a pretty clear answer.
Yeah, no, I think this is definitely more than what we've seen from T1 so far. They have risen to this occasion, whereas it feels like Hanwha have regressed to a lot of what their former mistakes were, I think, in draft and out in this series. But having a slow start to a best of 5 is something that they've also done.
Remember,
it's just clutching at straws a little bit to talk about it right now.
Remember some of the implications of T1 smashing this series, what it means for the rest of our quarterfinals as well, because T1 topped EDG, and Hanwha Life Esports made it very close against RNG, so it means a lot for T1 to crush this hard in their chances of maybe being able to contest Damwon Kia.
Yeah, I think that's a really huge point, because I think part of the reason why I was going a little bit harder on the Hanwha Life have a chance here narrative is because if T1 wins, they need to get credit for it. It can't just be, oh yeah, well they took down the 8th place team in their region, because that's not what this represents, right? This represents T1 tidying up their gameplay so much more, as this was a 5-game series. Is now Kana looking to try and get more Dunku Miyoshi, a massive ulti in the backline. The Varus just dies. I didn't even see what he got hit by. It just gets completely obliterated.
Baby coming through.
It was just needled. He was just needled, as Kana is just so extraordinarily strong right now. Willa trying to get away, but he's not going to be able to. Gets the thumbs up, and Kana is indeed unstoppable.
And this is giving me flashbacks to what we saw, as he might still get popped here.
Well, we'll see how immune he's going to be. We're going to try and cut down the Crocodile. It's going to be difficult, but does still have his circle available. Yeah, exactly. T1, they can just go over and grab it. And yes, congratulations, Hanwha Life Esports. You do have yourselves a Baron. But Faker is going to come through and try and do a 1v2. Ults himself. Gets a bit of extra damage down there, but Faker should still die, but no. Able to walk his way out. And yep, that's the last tick, calculated by the man in the mid lane.
Calculated. Greatest player of all time.
Yep, that's 100%. He knew that was going to happen. Yeah.
He could have also just not teleported, but I think the idea is, okay, well, there might be more players coming.
Let it go, Wolf. Let it go. Little bit of
people understand that was a little bit tongue-in-cheek.
Yes.
Yes.
Little bit of over-eagerness there coming through from T1 in the end, but it's understandable considering the game state. And this is a performance that even, I'm not 100% sure there was a game in the, I don't know if it was the one game they won or it was a game that they lost, but still, even in the summer finals against Damwon Kia, Kana looked insane on this Gwen pick, and it's one of his go-to picks if everything else is banned. Here again, look at the confidence that this player has. This is effectively a 3v4, or a 2v4, or a 1v4 even, depending on how close you consider the rest of the team.
Yeah, like, and then just needle, and he dies. And he was barely on the screen.
He was given so much gold early, and I mean, he's in such a lead right now that you could easily make these types of plays against a very squishy Varus, who has no protection with the support that they've chosen for him, right? He's playing with a Nautilus. There's no way out of this one, I'm afraid, and Morgan wasn't even there to peel.
Yeah, I'm starting to see why Varus hasn't been picked so far this tournament, as Deft has had next to no impact on this one whatsoever. T1 continuing to push their advantage forward, though, as the Claw is threatened there by Faker, but instead they're just going to take this turret. All just standing in the mist alongside Kana, as Ona just playing defense, and he can certainly do that. Still has the ulti. He can just helicopter them away if he wants to. Airlift, as we like to call it.
I mean, this one's all over but the crying, I think, in the second game. And if you're a Hanwha Life Esports fan, the tears might already be flowing a little bit. And we talked about the implications for what this means in terms of, you know, how the finals could look if we do see RNG or EDG tear through the top side of the bracket, one of the big favorites there. But I mean, talking about in the microcosm of this best of 5, like I was mentioning earlier, you get the first pick high priority LeBlanc, which is one of the strongest mid lanes right now across all regions, and you get dunked on this hard. How do you pick up the pieces going into the game 3s, and then if you win it 4s and 5s in terms of drafting and strategy here, because T1 are just one step ahead.
Yeah, it's really, really rough. They're going to fight for this blue buff. It is going to be secured there by Chovy, so at least there's that. And now Owner actually in a bit of trouble. He's going to flash his way out. Faker there to follow up, though, as he dives on forward with that Ring of Frost. Still has the ultimate. Also has a Zhonya's as well, as Faker actually going to fall here. He'd already used that Frozen Tomb, so unfortunately no option to have that one. It's a 1-for-1 thus far. Still trading evenly here on Hanwha Life Esports side. We were saying that, you know, that's bad. When you're behind, generally it's good, but I don't know. With the draft, it's so difficult here for Hanwha.
With how gimme of a fight that was for T1, the fact that this is this close is a bad sign. I mean, T1 were way out of position, and they still end up trading it back.
It's free.
Diving forward.
Keeps going. It's free ultimates invested as well, right? Like what we saw there was Hanwha Life throwing free ultimates into Own, who's still yodeling around the rift. Like he's feeling fine. He's not taken down at all. Again, there's kind of tight gameplay that we saw from T1 earlier on. They're letting the reins, you know, they're letting loose a little bit because they can, and I don't think they should, but they're able to. They have a lead this big, they have a skating advantage, they're in an incredible spot in this game. Can just chill until that Mountain Drake comes up and then just go for that. Because, as Wolf pointed out, like that fight should never have been that close. That was not a good fight for T1 to take, but when you're this rich, you can actually get away with it, and it's something that I think is going to be really hard to do anything in this game about for Hanwha Life. That's when we cast our eyes forward, right, to a possible third game, and then do you say Hanwha Life just draft scaling? I don't think that works against T1 with how they're playing right now.
No, I think taking away the Aphelios is a good start here. Gumayusi has been so extraordinarily comfortable. T1 have looked so clean playing around him on the bottom side, and Deft has honestly looked invisible this whole series.
Yeah, and that's not what that's not what we've seen from him in Worlds, and that's what we saw from him in the Gauntlet and even the very end of regular season for Summer, and it's disappointing to see, but it's also part of T1's whole game plan to put the Aphelios on the top side of the map early, try to get extra plate gold on him, and use that Rift Herald timing there. So I think just putting a wrench into the gears of T1 you know, at the drafting stage like that is one good way to start. But, I mean, we're looking at 2 minutes until a Mountain Soul versus a Varus that isn't fed. Like, it doesn't get much worse than this. I mean, I don't see a world where Hanwha Life Esports is going to suddenly bring this around unless T1 starts donating picks.
Yeah, now T1 going for a reset in anticipation of this Baron. It's back to business as usual here for this team. And just to look back in history just a little bit, I find it kind of poignant that this LeBlanc is left open and T1 punish it, because Deft was on the team that famously punished Faker for the very first time on his LeBlanc internationally back in 2015.
And it also is something of a showcase of how League has changed over the years. Because I think if Chovy was a player in 2014, 2015, individual carry performances were, I think, much more common. It was much more possible within the state of the game, but team play has become so much more important.
Well, looking for a bit of a fight here. Depth charge comes down from Vista. He's still very healthy as well. It comes through with the ulti. Okay, ult down now for Ona, so no one going to be disengaged just yet, but they've barely gotten through the health bars as Morgan comes around for a big flank. For the rest of his team, like, well, we're not really sure about this anymore.
Yeah, we can't rescue you, and Morgan has no teleport here, so he's going to have to just kind of hover around and wait for the sandwich to come through, but there's so much vision here for T1 that Hanwha Life Esports had to push through.
It's going to rush it down. Morgan can dive on over the side. Steadfast presence is going to be there, and the Poppy locks down the Baron. Now can they win the fight, though, as they immediately just run over Chovy, and with Chovy dead, there is nothing left. It's a triple kill for Gumayusi, and Deft finds himself alone. I think this is the end for Hanwha Life Esports in game number 2. As Deft not going to be able to cleanse again, and that's going to be the ace given over. T1 storm down the mid lane in an extraordinarily dominant first 2 games. They'll bring themselves to match point.
They've neutered Deft in the early game. They prevented Chovy from getting a lead back-to-back, game after game here. Chovy's not able to carry. He's not able to pop off. Morgan not getting ahead. And these early game, extremely tempo-based compositions that we're seeing Hanwha Life Esports try to run into an extremely macro-aware T1, a T1 that's playing the early game around Herald control well, a T1 that's controlling vision well, is not where you want to be as Hanwha Life Esports. Maybe just draft all scaling. Put yourself in a position where you could play something like a Camille, where you've seen Morgan in the side lane find success there. Put Chovy on the Azir if you can get that champion available. Put him on the Victor and play not the Varus, but something like a Jinx Thresh. That was open. That's something we could have seen from Hanwha Life Esports here, but they're running into a brick wall so hard, and I don't want to see them do it in game 3.
Yeah, and you're talking about